Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and I am thrilled that my first ever tier 10 tank in World of Tanks, if you didn't know, it's the E100, is finally getting some love on the 110 test server, which just went live a day ago. So the E100, it is getting a very substantial buff to two of the aspects of this tank that I really feel have been kind of power crept by all of the other vehicles in the game. Firstly, the E100 is now going to have two competitive guns. Now previously, I really think the better gun to take on the tank would always be the 150mm caliber gun. The 128mm caliber gun just didn't really feel like it packed the punch that was required at tier 10, and of course when you decided to load the gold, the rounds weren't quite as good as you would need to be able to really trade with those top tier vehicles. And so I personally love to use the 150mm caliber gun on the E100. Now on the 110 test server, now let me clarify, the E100 that you see on the left here is the current E100, and the E100 that you see on the right here is actually the statistics taken from the 110 test server using the Always Awesome Tanks GG website. So if you choose to use the derp gun on the next test server, your aim time will be improved ever so slightly by 0.2 seconds, but more importantly, the tank's turret armor is going to be buffed by 20mm on the front. So just to put that into perspective as to what that means for you. I mean, 20mm, what does it really mean in World of Tanks? Well, let's think about it in percentage terms about whether you're going to be penetrated by the enemy tank. Let's say, for example, you're getting shot by an E100. Here is the chance currently for an E100 to penetrate itself in the turret. It's probably got about a 46% chance of going through this front bar right at the bottom of the turret. And then you've got about a 24% chance of going through the upper turret armor. And then, of course, you can penetrate the bar on top of the tank. On the 110 test server, however, you can see that clearly the armor is substantially improved. Now you only have a 7 to a 0% chance of going through the turret. Just look how much more red it is. And in this case, red is great. Also, take a look at the bar on this tank. It's going from 250 up to 310, so it's not just a 20mm buff in some aspects of the tank. Now, of course, not many people actually fired standard rounds at the front of the E100 turret. Most people will be firing 340 heat, right? And as we can see here, yeah, it's going to go through 70% of the time currently. And if we look at it in the 110 test server, now it's actually dropping down to about 50, maybe 60% chance. So while it's definitely not going to keep the tank, it's not going to make the tank immortal against gold rounds, it's definitely going to substantially help. And if you think about angling the E100's turret armor and also using some of the 7 degrees of gun depression the vehicle has over the side, then currently the E100 can't even ricochet a heat round when it's fully angled. However, next patch, as you can clearly see, it's got a much higher chance of being able to avoid the shell if we get the angles correct here. Just about like that. And we can see that there's actually a location here where you're not going to be able to be penned on the front. Absolutely fantastic. So the E100 turret armor getting some much needed love. But you might be thinking, well, it doesn't really look like the gun's getting the changes that it needs, right? Well, that's because Wargaming probably think, well, people use the derp gun as it is, the 150mm. It doesn't really need a buff. The tank's doing okay with it. However, Wargaming seem to want to give you two ways to play the E100 on the 110 test server, and that is because the 128mm caliber gun is getting a substantial buff. Look at this. If you choose to use the 128mm caliber gun, your DPM is going up to 2,650. That's kind of the line of a WZ-111-5A, for example. That's absolutely amazing damage per minute. And that's because the rate of fire is being buffed up to 5 rounds a minute, but the alpha damage is also increasing from 490 to 530. However, with this DPM and with this alpha damage buff, the gun handling on the 128mm caliber gun is going to get worse when you turn the turret, and also the accuracy is going to be a bit worse, and the aim time is going to be a little bit worse as well at 2.5 seconds. But all in all, I think this could make the E100 look like an absolute monster brawler against, should we say, reasonably armored vehicles, where you don't just have to dab the 2 key and have great heat pen, because while your APCR rounds at 311 are not exactly awful, yeah, they're definitely not incredible. Anyway, I think I could talk all day about the E100, considering it was my first tier 10 tank, one of my true loves in World of Tanks. Why don't we just get stuck in on the battlefield on the 110 test server? So here we go, we're rolling out on Live Oaks on the 110 test server, and as you can see on the minimap, there are actually 2 new kind of ping locations. I'm not going to be talking about those in this video. There is a lot to talk about with the 110 test server. It's actually looking like one of the biggest updates of World of Tanks. But I was just so excited to talk about the E100 as it's my first ever tier 10 vehicle. Yeah, I couldn't help myself but feature it today. So I'm using the 128mm caliber gun. 573 damage there. And the thing is, if I was using the derp gun, I would be worried about investing all of that alpha damage in one shot. I wouldn't be ready to go again. We couldn't actually see the tracer of the shell there, but it looks like it flies just past the Sheridan and actually hits the barn on the other side and does some slight damage to it. If you want to reload the video or rewind the video to be able to see that, be my guest. So this 128mm caliber gun has better aim time, it has better gun handling than the big old derpy the derpy round on this vehicle. And to have that extra damage per minute, to have the reload at such a good position on this tank, it's looking like it's going to be a different kind of vehicle. Now, I'm thinking that you're still probably best to have the big caliber gun if you're duking it out with heavy tanks, because you're probably going to need those heat rounds, those 330, 340 millimeter heat penetration rounds that really allow you to just go through the front of whatever you want. Now, the 128mm caliber gun isn't going to have that, but it's going to have a much better alpha damage, for example, for tracking your opponents, for locking them in place, or just having the much better damage per minute that you require sometimes to be able to handle a wide variety of vehicles. Yeah, I kind of get out-traded there by the FV4005. But you could argue that maybe it was the better gun handling that actually allowed me to be able to snapshot the guy on the move, and he could be lucky to be able to hit me. Doesn't look like that 20mm of buff really helped the side of the tank there, as I still take 600 damage, but maybe I would have taken more. Just look at the gun handling that this vehicle has with this gun. And oh dear, I'm about to get myself into a very sticky situation. You can hear that I actually pressed my F7 key to ask for some help here, and I'm going to turn my arm around towards this TVP to try and avoid as much damage as I can. I bounce his first heat round. And there's an FV again on my side. He manages to pen me for 700. Well, he splashes me for 700. And the TVP puts 2 more rounds into me. Make that 3 rounds, and oh dear, I am down to 339 hit points now. But I've actually managed to do 2,600 damage. Make that 3,000 damage. And look at how we can defend ourselves intelligently here by just micromanaging the different angles that we play at the E100. We actually managed to bounce the ST2 round a couple of times there. And up to 3,600 damage in the first 3 minutes of this battle. The FV4005 puts a round through the turret of the vehicle, actually getting fully absorbed, and the ST2 hits me as well as again. So I'm trying to bait this TVP around the corner if I can, and oh no, I don't actually manage to get him, but I lock his tracks down. Am I going to be able to turn the tank around now to be able to avoid the ST2? Yes, I can. Our artillery is actually giving us some support, and I'm just waiting, hoping that this FV comes around the corner so I can punish him. But oh no! All of the buffs to this tank couldn't save me from RNG. Did you see that disgusting roll? We actually did 413 damage out of 530, practically min-rolling and leaving that blooming FV4005 on a very small amount of hit points. To be exact, 3 hit points. Thank you, World of Tanks. But oh my word, did you see what we were able to do in the E100 there? We were able to do 8,000 combined in such a short period of time. If we take a look at the replay file of here, we actually end up being top of the team on experience, even though we were one of the first to die, as we did get taken out 3 minutes and 13 seconds into the battle. The E100 with that gun just looks like a completely different tank. No longer is it a vehicle which is just purely designed on trying to trade with its opponents, trying to make use of the higher alpha damage that it has. Now it can actually go toe-to-toe with them. It can use that incredible alpha damage to really be able to just trade more effectively in those fights where you can't trade one-for-one shot. So this 128mm caliber gun is incredibly interesting. I'm thinking that it looks like it's going to breathe a whole new lease of life into the E100, a vehicle which I think if you choose to use the 150mm caliber gun on the tank right now, well, it's not the worst tank you're ever going to play, especially if you're used to how the vehicle's armor works and how you should try and defend yourself as well as you can inside the tank. I think that the real elephant in the room, so to say, is the fact that the 60 TP is just so much better than the E100 currently. The 60 TP has the better turret, the 60 TP has the better gun depression, the 60 TP probably even has the same kind of rate of fire. And while the E100 does have that higher heat penetration with the 150mm caliber gun, I just think you'd be crazy to want to play something which can be penetrated by heat in the turret and not choose the 60 TP. Now look, while the E100's turret armor buff is definitely going to help it from regular rounds penetrating the tank, and it's also going to give the tank an opportunity to be able to defend itself intelligently against gold rounds by also angling the turret, it's definitely not going to make the vehicle invincible. You're still going to be able to go through it about 60% of the time with 340 heat pen, but then again, if we think about it, if it's being engaged by something like the TVP that was shooting us there, and remember that the TVP only has 310 millimeters of heat pen, yeah, it starts to look like that the TVP would actually struggle a lot more and only be able to go through the turret about 40% of the time. And if the E100 actually angles, yeah, you're bouncing it the vast majority of the times. So this makes a huge difference to the E100's turret. But the thing that really gets my attention is this 128mm caliber gun. And for all of you E75 drivers out there, you're going to be happy to hear that the E75 is also getting this 128mm caliber gun. It's getting a similar turret buff, and it's keeping the same rate of fire. So it's an overall big buff to the E75 as well. And Tiger 2 drivers out there, the same thing is happening. They're getting turret armor buffs, and they're getting an alpha damage increase without the rate of fire dropping, which means all in all, it's a good time to be thinking about going down your German heavies, or in fact, how about dusting them off and actually giving them a round? And so there's no doubt in my mind that while everything is preliminary and subject to change on the test server, the buffs might be too much, they might nerf them a little bit, the buffs might not be enough, and they might actually make it even better still. We'll just have to wait and see between now and the second and the third iteration of the 1.10 test server to see what happens. But all in all, I'm thinking that this tank looks like it's going to be absolutely awesome. I'm not thinking it's going to be completely overpowered. It's going to be the new best tank you've ever played in your life, but it's definitely going to be more of a challenge to be able to handle these vehicles, especially if they're using that 128mm caliber gun. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed this one, and hope you like the look of the buffs to the E100. If you do, give the video a thumbs up. If you hated the video, however, make sure you give the video a thumbs down. And you know what? I'm actually proud of this community, because today, all of you have voted for an E100 Tech Tree Showcase right now on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby. So come along as I play through the unbuffed version of the E100, starting at tier 1 and finishing at tier 10, so I can play my original tier 10 heavy tank. Really looking forward to it. So hopefully I'll see all of you right now on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.